What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
My name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are continuing our series on the witness at the cross, and today we're talking about the Roman centurion.
That's right.
Are you ready to do this?
I am ready. Let's jump into it.
Let's go. All right, Dave, I'm not going to lie. I don't know that I've got a question today. I just came straight from the meal or grown-ups and donuts event that we just did, which was great.
Nice.
I had a lot of fun. Talked to some new friends and all that good stuff, but I didn't think about a question.
We're good. Yeah, you don't have to come every week with a question. Sometimes we can just chat.
Just chat. How are things?
Things are good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Teresa was out of town this weekend.
So you're living that bachelor life?
So me and the cat watched a lot of soccer.
Okay.
But I'm doing all right. How about you? What'd you do this weekend?
Man, we didn't do a lot. We kind of visited a little family on Rachel's side and did some yard stuff. It was kind of a boring weekend overall in that kind of vein, but you know, it was good. It was good to kind of get some of that stuff started and done. And got a lot of things we still got to do. You know, it's that, I guess it got to like 70 this week. So my brain went to like, yeah,
but then it got cold again and rained. But yeah, maybe that's going to turn around.
Yeah, but it kind of put me into that space of like, I got to get the yard ready, you know, all that good stuff. So before we know it, we'll be mowing and sneezing because of pollen and all that good stuff.
All right, well, that's enough chit chat. We're ready to
dive in.
Leap into this. And so if you've been following along, you know, we are doing a message series, which is not unusual. But this one's a pretty long one because we are in the season of Lent. And so it's one that follows through Lent. It's called Witness at the Cross. It's based on a book by Amy Jill Levine. And so we looked at different characters, different people that were present on Good Friday for the crucifixion of Jesus, and kind of learned their stories and tried to see something that we could glean from what their witness of the cross was. And so we started with Simon of Cyrene on Ash Wednesday. Then we looked at the bystanders and scoffers. Last week we had the two thieves on the either sides. And this week we move into the Roman centurion, are really the soldiers. Amy Jill Levine's chapter title is actually called The Soldiers. And the Roman centurion would have been a soldier. He was just in charge. But since we were kind of focusing in on him a lot, I titled my sermon "The Roman Centurion." But it needs to be stated. I think people probably realize it, that all of these times during the gospel, it was during the Roman Empire, which was huge at the time and extremely powerful, with a huge, very powerful, very well-funded military. And so the military presence is felt several times through the gospel. You'll see reference to it. For example, Jesus tells in his preaching, I think in the Beatitudes, he talks about if someone asks you to go 1 mile or carry their things 1 mile, go with them too. That is in direct reference to something called conscription, which was at that time. And what that is that a Roman soldier could come to you and say, you have to carry all my gear for 1 mile. And you had to do it. Just 1 mile. You didn't have to carry it any further. But that was the law. And so the Jewish people hated a lot of things about the Roman soldiers, but this is probably one of the things that was most kind of abusive, and, you know, they didn't like it at all.
Yeah, I'm sure that was taken advantage of a little bit.
Right, yeah. And so it was the conscription things that, like Simon of Cyrene, when they said, you know, they picked him out of the crowd to carry Jesus' cross when Jesus collapsed and couldn't carry it. So the Roman presence is there, the soldier's presence. And through the Holy Week story, beginning with Palm Sunday, which was, as I mentioned in church, this was a huge, to call it holidays. Well, holidays are holy days. That's where we get holidays. But these were huge holy days for the Jewish people, the most holy, probably, Passover week in Jerusalem, when my understanding is the population would grow to like 4 times what the normal population was. Wow. So people coming in for these days, because Jerusalem was their holy city, and to come to the temple and to have the Passover meal in the temple was a big deal. So they would send even more extra Roman soldiers, a legion of Roman soldiers, which would be 6,000, additional troops were sent there. And so their presence was all over the place. We see it in the garden. Well, we see it all through the whole Passion story. I'm always a little hoarse after speaking, and I'm a little more hoarse today. But so we see it in the, in the garden particularly because, after they're the ones that are sent to arrest Jesus. And I mentioned this morning the sort of skirmish where Peter cuts off the ear of one of the soldiers and Jesus heals him. But that's where we see that, and then all throughout the trial, and then certainly at the crucifixion, because they were the ones who would
Carry out.
I'm trying to think it's a good word. Carry out the crucifixion. That was part of their job, and particularly the Roman centurion. The other significant thing was the primary text I used today was Mark's gospel. And Mark, theologians will tell us, and it's pretty obvious from just the way it's set up in the first sentence, that Mark is about Jesus is the Son of God. That is the whole declaration. So we should pay attention to who says that and when, and how people react to that. So it begins with that sort of declaration in verse 1. This is the gospel, about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. That's where it starts. And then we hear that phrase a little bit later, a few verses later, when Jesus is baptized, the Holy Spirit comes down on Jesus, and God's voice says, "You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." So God's Son there. And then people largely just miss who Jesus is there. They think he's a lot of things, and those in authority sometimes look at him as a threat, and other people are trying to figure out what he is. And so about halfway through the gospel, Jesus gathers his guys, and they go on a little day trip up to Caesarea Philippi, and he says, "Hey, what are people saying about me?" And they said, well, they're saying a lot of things. They're saying that maybe you're reincarnation of Elijah or John the Baptist. And so he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And at that point in the gospel, Peter says, "You are the Messiah," which is not exactly like saying you are the Son of God.
Right.
But the implication is definitely there. Then in the next chapter, still about halfway through the gospel, we get it again, but again, we get it from God. At the transfiguration of Jesus, Jesus got a few of his disciples with him up on this mountain, and Elijah and Moses appear there. It's mystery. I tried to preach on it, but there is definitely mystery with what happened to this transfiguration there. But that is one of the other places in Mark, about halfway through, where Jesus is called the Son of God.
Now, can you remind me, is that Mark's account of the transfiguration, or is that him like hearing the story and rewriting it of what happened?
It's secondhand.
Okay.
It's Mark hearing. Mark is putting down the Gospels. The first things that were written were the letters. So that's the first thing that we have is the church spread. So the letters are, 20, 30 years after Jesus died, when, Paul was missionary, maybe some a little bit sooner than that, but, they're the first things written. And then as the original eyewitnesses are dying out, then we start seeing these Gospels writing. And there's, the church, in its wisdom, guided by the Holy Spirit, selected 4 Gospels.
Right.
Mark was probably written first, followed by Matthew and Luke, and then John was probably written about 100 in AD.
Gotcha.
There's some discussion of when the temple was destroyed by the Romans again. In 70 AD. We know that. And so we try to pick up some clues. Was the temple destroyed when Mark was written? And so some people date Mark from 55 to 80 because of that. I would make the argument that it was written before the temple was destroyed, and maybe the later Gospels. Definitely John was after the temple was destroyed. And that's a podcast for another day as to why.
Sorry, I was just trying to remember.
I find it interesting, so where was I going with that? Okay, so we've got this message, this point that Mark is making throughout, that Jesus is the Son of God. So that's where I said all that as background, because it is significant who testifies. We're talking about witness at the cross. Who witnesses that Jesus is the Son of God? Who is going to be the person that does it? And so we read an account from Mark's about Jesus' death today. And, his final hours, the last thing he says. And then we have the Roman centurion, after he breathed his last, it says, when the Roman centurion saw the way in which he died. Very interesting phrase. Of course, now we're saying it in English.
Right.
It was written in, they were speaking probably in Aramaic, and it was written in Greek. That's the way it's translated. And I looked at 4 or 5 translations. That is it. Saw the way in which he died, which I find a very interesting phrase. So what was it about? But anyway, when he saw that, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. Is what he said. Yeah. His witness from watching all of that. And so, it is, so what led him to say that? That's the big question there. Yeah. What was it about the way that Jesus died? Was it things that he saw beforehand? Maybe he was one of the ones that was on patrol and saw Jesus preach somewhere earlier. These are things we don't know. Maybe he was there on Palm Sunday, one of the Roman people that was there and saw Jesus there. Maybe he was on patrol and saw him in the temple. We don't know. We can assume, a lot of things, but based on what we know in Scripture this is, all he knows is his boss, Pontius Pilate, has said, put this guy to death.
Yeah.
And so at the cross, he would have heard those last words of Jesus, those phrases that Jesus talked about. Everybody was mocking and scoffing him.
The conversation with
the other people around, he would have, with the thieves on the cross, he would have witnessed that. So was it something in that? Or, was it something else? And these are things we don't know. This is where we really have to use our imagination. And I don't want to read anything in, but we have to decide what our witness is going to be.
Yeah.
Because this man who was a Roman soldier, hated by, and you had so many other people. Peter denied him 3 times. You've seen all these other people. Although Peter does profess him as the Messiah halfway through, you watch Peter's behavior through the next few chapters in Mark, and you see him like kind of clueless.
Yeah.
And, certainly the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious leaders who should have been able to see from the witness of Jesus and the prophecy that he fulfilled and all those things, they should have seen that this was the Messiah, the Son of God, yet they missed it. Yet Mark chooses to put that in Matthew and Luke do as well. It's not in John, but in Matthew and Luke, we see him being the first person, and certainly the first Gentile to profess Jesus.
Isn't it amazing?
As the Son of God.
It's amazing how, the way you just said that, of how the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all that, they should have known, they should have seen. Yeah. And it's isn't it amazing how the lens at which we look through something will just determine exactly what what we're looking for. If we look at him as a threat, we're looking for all the reasons why he's a threat, not paying attention to just the things he's doing along the way that might be oh no, this is actually prophecy filling, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
And it's almost like, if as you see them getting upset about him eating on the Sabbath, or those kind of things, logical things that you would think that they wouldn't be so offended by the act as much as they've already decided to be offended by Jesus and see him as a threat. Right. So they're looking for things to call him out for.
Yep.
And, it's a whole thing about the temple. I think that was largely maybe 2 weeks ago we talked about, Jesus made the statement, destroyed this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. Yep. Well, he's talking about himself. And maybe it's just we know that and it's so obvious to us that it wasn't they had to have seen that he wasn't how could you, it took years and years and years to build the temple. How could he destroy the temple and rebuild it? But if you've already made him into this villain, then, one thing he says is as good as another. Yeah. The whole story of the blind man, the blind man who they're trying to get him to call it because Jesus heals him on the Sabbath.
Right.
And so they bring in the blind man to kind of put him under trial about who healed you, and you see this blind man becoming more and more aware of who Jesus was, because at first he just says, I don't know.
Some guy.
all I know is I was blind, now I can see.
Yeah.
But as he goes through the story, he sees more and more. And so, it's interesting. In Mark, you see a lot of people that are spiritually blind, and yet this Roman centurion has spiritual sight to see that. And so once again, this seems to be more frequent for me now. I brought in a movie, and I wanted to ask you, have you seen The Green Mile?
I have not seen The Green Mile, but the way you kind of threw it out there.
You've got a list, my friend, that I've got.
Write it down, because I need some.
You've seen Shawshank Redemption.
I have definitely seen Shawshank.
Okay, so this is another prison movie, and very well done. And so John Coffey is the prisoner who's there, who's innocent, who's really kind of the Christ figure. And I actually mentioned in service that Stephen King, based on, most of us think of him with horror stories and Carrie and stuff like that, but he is actually a believer. He was raised in the church, then left the church and was not a believer. But then he had kind of a conversion experience where he now believes in God. I don't know that he believes in God in what a lot of people would say the traditional church way, but he definitely believes in God, and you see a lot more religious imagery showing up in his work. And one of the first things that he did was The Green Mile. Okay. And so in it, you have John Coffey, JC. You have a prisoner on the left and a prisoner on the right who are in the cells. One is good and one is evil. I mean, you have all this imagery, and so in this movie, the Roman centurion would have been the warden, which is played by Tom Hanks, and his name is Paul. And so he gets there. This guy's innocent, and he's just, I can't remember the actor that played him. I love that actor. He's in several things. He usually plays like in some spy movie. He's like the bouncer kind of guy. He's a huge guy. I don't know his background, if he played football or what, but the guy's like 6'10", 7 feet tall, just muscle.
Not Andre the Giant.
No, it's not that. Now, and he's not quite as big as Andre the Giant, but he's a big guy.
Okay.
A great actor. And I should know his name. I should have looked it up. But anyway, he plays this character. He's kind of a simple guy. He has been accused of this murder that he did not do. He's actually a very gentle guy. And so he's sentenced to death there. And he's on death row with all the other people in the Green Mile, which is death row. And so, you see his own interactions. A lot of people don't really interact with him because he's a different kind of guy. He has this sort of spiritual touch on him. And he's able to heal people. He heals Tom Hanks, the Paul character, who had been having this terrible pain, and I think it's kidney related or something. He lays his hands on him, and it's really weird the way he does it, because he'll put his hands on them, and then like these bees will come out of his mouth. It's very, very eerie.
Okay.
But as he takes in the evil and puts it out, then there's a little mouse, Mr. Jingles, which becomes a character in that. And Mr. Jingles, the prisoner, I forget the guy, Dale, I think is the other prisoner, who's kind of a simple guy himself. I can't remember his story, but he's also in death row for something he did. And I don't know, remember, but I think it was, he is guilty, but I think there was some extenuating circumstances as to why he's there, but on death row.
Got it.
But he's a very gentle, very sweet, kind of simple guy. And he has this little pet mouse named Mr. Jingles. And this evil prisoner comes in who's just personification of the devil character in there. And he stomps on Mr. Jingles and kills Mr. Jingles. And
poor Mr. Jingles.
Poor Mr. Jingles. But John Coffey gets Mr. Jingles, hoses him in the hand, and brings him back to life.
With the bees.
I don't know if the bees. I don't know if the bees were. There might have been.
Okay.
I can't remember. But it brings him back to life. And so Tom Hanks is now a believer.
Yeah.
He is now a believer in this guy, and he actually his wife is dying of cancer. Takes her out he takes John Coffey out. It's a big deal to take him to his wife's deathbed, essentially, and he heals her. And so now he is a total believer. And so I need all that backstory to say what I think are very significant phrase. And knowing that that Stephen King is saying it from a place of faith and the knowledge of the Bible makes sense when you see the story that unfolds. But he comes to, it's just a couple of weeks before John Coffey is supposed to be put to death. And he comes to him and said, "What do you want me to do? Do you want me to let you go and just let you run and see how far you can get?" And John Coffey says, "Why would you do such a foolish thing?" And the Paul character says, "I'm going to have to stand before God. And what am I going to say when he says, 'Why did you kill one of my miracles?' That it was my job?" So that phrase, I think of the Roman centurion, you know, when he saw the way in which he died, you know, he recognized it was God's son. I wonder if he had those thoughts as well.
Yeah.
And so, and John Coffey goes on to say, you know, he's just tired and he's ready to die, and you know, it's a kindness that he'll be doing because there's just so much hate and ugliness in the world that he is just it's like glass in his brain, glass in his mind when he did that. So I also wonder when Jesus looked around and all the hate and all the pain that he took upon him, if that, you know, you could see the parallels. You know, this is one's a fictional work and one's the Bible, but you know, there's some great parallels there. And so the thing that I used at the benediction was the movie ends kind of cool because Tom Hanks has been narrating it all the way through, and you see him in person, and he's old guy, he's 108 years old.
Wow.
And Mr. Jingles is still alive because they've been healed. So,
Dang.
So
It's an old mouse.
it's an old mouse, but yeah. So, you know, it's a beautiful movie. It really is. Different from a lot of Stephen King's, if you've seen, you know, Carrie's the one I think of, but, you know, he's done some others.
Yeah.
And sort of science fiction kind of stuff too. But anyway, so we're left, I mean, at the end of it all, we are left with a decision we have to make too in watching Jesus, because we have the words of the gospel and we've seen the way in which he died.
Yeah.
We've seen an innocent man died for the sins of humanity. And so what will be our witness from the cross is what we have to come away with it, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's such an interesting idea and thing to think about because, you know, we're talking about these people who lived right there in the moment and they're processing live, you know what I mean? Like in the middle of seeing this stuff happen, and we have an opportunity that we get to see kind of how the whole Bible played out, you know, like, well, not the whole thing, but we got to see at least how Jesus' story played out, you know, and we kind of study it and we think about it and we process, but really like, because we've gotten to analyze and think through it like we're doing now. Yeah. Like it should have an impact on us, you know, for them. Again, I could see them going away for a month and kind of being like, what just happened? Right. Do you know what I mean? But for us, like this is what we preach on weekly. This is what
that's a great point of what happened next.
Yeah.
To that, particularly the Roman centurion, you know, in the Green Mile movie, the warden quits his job. Yeah. After John Coffey's you wonder what did he do next, and we don't know, we can't know. And one of the things that the A.J. Levine, you know, it's just like sometimes we have to use our imagination in the story because we don't, you know, we have to be cautious. I think about filling in the blanks too much, you know, and then making that become an extra gospel or something. But I do think God gave us minds to imagine the different scenarios of where we go with it, because we have experiences too. Right. And how we choose to respond and to move on within those experiences that we have. A month later, is he just back to normal? You know, the Roman centurion? Because I know in a lot of our lives, we have a big religious experience and a month later, what's changed?
That's a good point.
And so, you know, how are we going to respond to what we've seen and read? Yeah. I think it's major theme we should take away with it. But I'm enjoying this book. It's been good. And I enjoy teaching the class on Wednesday night too. So, and I'd just say as a little plug, it's an open class, and it's not like Disciple Bible Study, another Bible study where you have to be there every week because things build and build and build.
Right.
If you're curious and, as you're watching this, want to come out on Wednesday night from 7 to, 6 to 7. We start at 6. 6 to 7, right in the sanctuary.
That's right.
And
we still do have a couple books that you can grab too if you need to.
Right, and they're readily online as
Yeah.
well. So we've got some others if you want to buy one from the church. But it's a great book. It's making a lot of people think. It's interesting talking to other people that are doing it in different classes.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this last week, but I think I've heard every week is like, this takes a while to digest because it's it's much more to think about because she's a professor, so she probably is bringing a lot of that information with her, and
there is an academic quality to it.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of our other teachers today. One thing I love that she does is that she really does the parallel gospels thing and points out that Matthew says it this way and there's a nuance, and Mark says it this way, and there's a nuance in the way that Matthew says it. And so that we have to ask the question, why did Matthew change that? Or why does Matthew choose to tell it from this different perspective? And she does a lot of that work, almost to the point where I can see where it could get bogged down in sort of kind of academic exercise.
Yeah.
But it's great for preparing to preach.
Yeah, sure.
So
gives you a lot of good content.
It gives a lot of good content. So, yeah, but I'm enjoying that. We're about halfway through. I guess we are halfway through.
Yeah.
Because there's 6
Week 3.
6 weeks, and this was week 3 today. So hope people are enjoying it. And if you haven't seen the message or the previous ones, I try not to plug this too much, but if you want to watch those, they're on Facebook and YouTube and our website, so you can find those there. And
I also want to give a shout out. We've been we've mentioned it here on the podcast. We've been doing this 40 days of sharing here as a church, and me and Nicole kind of were unpacking and organizing a little bit out there in the Welcome Center, but it's just been great and awesome, the turnout that's already happened. And I was like, man, it's only week 2. Now it's week 3.
Right. Well, and I haven't looked at it today, but just after 2 weeks, we had so much stuff, which is fantastic, and you should give.
Yes, thank you for giving.
For generosity. But it's just like, our idea was to have this section where we could collect everything, just sort of as a testimony.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
I'm not sure it's going to hold.
I don't think sure it's going to hold.
We might have to have a plan B place.
But thank you all for your generosity to that. And the little video clips that Nick and his production team telling us about the different ministries.
Yeah.
Because each one of I think we have 6 weeks and 6 different ministry groups. And so, this week was really our first outside ministry group when we heard from House of Hope and the good work that they do. You and I both have been over there. We worked over there.
That's right.
For you.
A couple times.
So anyway, it's great ministries that, that our church is already involved with and want to do more. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And thank you guys for watching. Like Dave mentioned, all this stuff is on YouTube. It's on Facebook. So you can go back and watch previous episodes. You can join us for the next episode. But more importantly is we like to be in conversation and community. So please feel free to add your own takes. If you're reading the study along with us, what do you think about it? Does it feel academic? Does it feel like it's maybe a little bogging and it takes you a little while to get through it? Or is this like really cool and fascinating stuff? We'd love to hear about it and all that good stuff. So without further ado, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks. God bless.